Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, based on your time zone. Welcome in Salesforce Epics Hour. My name is Amit Chaudhary. I'm the founder and your host. So today we have a great automation champion, Rakesh Gupta, with us, who is going to talk about flow design pattern. And let me hand over him for his introduction and the presentation. Hand over to you, Rakesh.
Thank you, Amit. Thanks for the opportunity. This was one of my dream to come and speak in Salesforce FX Hour. So thank you. Hey, everyone. My name is Rakesh Gupta. I'm Salesforce Senior Solution Architect, Salesforce MVP, and author. And my free time, I do blogging at automationchampion.com. With that, I also co-lead Navi Mumbai Developer User Group with Nikhil Khitan, and I also co-host Automation Hour with Salesforce MVP, Michelle Hansen. So if you have any use case, you want to share your experience of Salesforce Pro, you have some learning tips, please feel free to reach out to us. We will be happy to have you. With that said, how many of you ever used Salesforce Flows in the past, or is it Salesforce Flow new? Just add your add in the comment. So if you ever used Salesforce Flow in the past, or which automation tool you are using right currently? Is it Process Builder, or is it Workflow Tool, or you are using Apex Trigger? Oh, good. So people are saying they are moving to flows. Okay, good. Flows, Apex Trigger. Okay, there is no, okay, all three, no Apex. Okay, good. Need a flows and used to Process Builder. Good. So what is an automations first? So there are some new people I see in this meeting. So let me start with the very basic. What did automation do? Automation help you to save your time. Time is money. So if you want to success, you need more times. As in business users, we don't want to do same thing again and again manually. Like for example, as soon as you onboard a customer, you don't want to send every time a manual email. You want to have those automated. Or as soon as you convert a lead and you any customer is agreed to sign purchase the product, you may want to send a contract. You don't want to do all these things manually. There are some things you forget, like for example, as a financial advisor, you want to set up 3 times a meeting in a year with your customers. You don't want to do all these things manually because you may forget. There are lots of things which may mess up. So these things can be automated via either code or using flows or workflow rule process builder. But here is the automations comes in the picture, which help reps to minimize and remove some of the manual tasks and use automations. Like what? I just give you an example. There are things we do over and over. Like, okay, if I get a contact voicemail, create a task. You can do that using automations. Like 40 days before insurance policies renewal, you want to notify customers and financial advisors so they can take promptive actions to renew or contract or insurance policy. There are things can get messed up when the customer sign up. You may want to create a contract. This is some in some company they have some complex process like create a contract, then get an approval from manager, chief financial officer, then send a contract. So you can automate such process. And there are some things which does not require any skills, like sending a welcome email. You don't want to do all this manually. You want to save your time so that your reps can invest their time somewhere else, so that your company can achieve their yearly financial goals. And these all things can happen via Salesforce automation tools, either code, without code. Now, flow is the future. So how many of you heard about an announcement that Salesforce is saying they are moving away from process builder and workflow rule? Just mention in the chat if you heard about it. Yes, good. So people heard about it. Oh, good. So everyone heard. Okay, good to know that. So Salesforce is moving away from the workflow rule and process builder. Why? Because if I give an example, what is the need of Salesforce Flow? Salesforce Flow has capability that workflow rule process builder does not have. Like for an example, there are lots of objects that supported by Salesforce Flow, which does not supported by workflow rule or process builder. Like for example, a permission set object or shared tables, or there are different objects which is not available on the process builder, either workflow rule. Second, process builder only fires when a record is created or edited, but a Salesforce Flow has a capability to fire when record is created, edited, or deleted. Third, Salesforce Flow has a capability. You can take a user input and expose that flow to World Wide Web so that an authenticated user can enter the data and you can capture it. A process builder does not have. Salesforce Flow has a capability to delete a record. Process builders does not have that. Salesforce Flow itself has an ability to schedule a job, and you can pick the record by writing a logic, and you can able to perform certain actions. So that process builder does not have. Process builder has time dependent action, but process builder does not have scheduling job. So there are differences when it's come to the Salesforce flows and process builder and workflow tool. And having one tool will remove the confusion. So that's why I think it is the right decision to moving away from process builder and workflow tool and have one tools to automate all the business requirement. So Salesforce flows has different flavors. Like it has a screen flow where you can take a user input and process it, or record trigger flow, which can fire when record created, edited, or deleted, or a schedule trigger flow, which can fire at specified time, or platform event trigger flows, or an auto launch flow. So how many of you have used all of this type of flows in the past? And there are other flows as well. Like if you use Salesforce field service lightning, there are different kind of template that you can use for field service lightning or financial services. So how many of you have used all type of flows what that mentioned in the right now in the current screen? Anyone just mention in the chat? Okay, so someone is saying, okay, I have only used a screen flow 3x5. Okay, good. Only screen flows. Okay, good. 4x5. Okay, so we have, what is the $5? Okay, so dollar is 4x5. Okay, only screen flow 5x5. Okay, good, Amit. Okay, so there are people, there are mix of people. So people have used screen flow, record trigger flows, schedule flow, platform event trigger flow, and auto launch flow. Okay, and the best part of the Salesforce Flow is there is lots of App Exchange package that you can install and use within a flows, and you can get more out of it. We will talk about some of them. You can also write Lightning Web Component and embed in the sales screen flows, or you can use an FX class. We can plug and play in record trigger flows or schedule flow or somewhere else. Okay, someone is saying screen flow, auto launch flow, and record trigger flow. Good. Okay, in this session, I will talk about some of the best practices which will help you to become Salesforce automation expert. And I will also present my ideas of one trigger, one Salesforce flow per object. So let's begin. So the first and foremost important thing, always plan before you build. So I'm going to ask a quick questions. How many of you as a developer, admin, or architect follow this approach? Do you, when you get a requirement, do you directly build the flows or anything, or you do some mind mapping and then think about it, design the solution, and then do the solution building? So go ahead, put your comment in the chat. Okay, so directly, okay. All right, good. Someone is always use write a draft. That's good. We're directly spell solid solution. Okay, so there are mix of people. Someone is saying they map, they do the POC. Someone is saying directly build, and someone saying okay design. So my suggestion is based on my experience, always plan before you build, because what happen is when you get a requirement, if I'm talking about just flows, there are lots of possibilities that the logic that you are going to build is maybe logic that you might want to use somewhere else. So if you directly build a flow, you only going to build a record trigger flow. But what about if there are some reusable component? You may want to use a subflow so that you can plug in play with somewhere else with the maybe Apex trigger, or maybe different flows or screen flows, and then you can use it, which will help you to not write same logic again and again. Second, if you plan it and then you start building it, there are advantages like sometime when you start building it and then you stuck somewhere and say, okay, shit, I have to use here Apex because that is not possible with the flows. Like for an example, if you ever use platform encryption and if you enable a platform encryption for a field, you cannot filter out record using those fields in the Salesforce Flow. Salesforce Flow as a Winter 22 release does not support such features. So now what? You have to use an Apex plugin. Or for example, you have a list of account IDs and you want to get opportunities, all opportunities for that account. No, those are not possible with the Salesforce Flow because get element does not accept a list of IDs. It only accepts single ID. So in such scenarios, you may want to plan before and think about how you are going to implement it. What are the ingredients? I always say ingredients. What are the ingredients you have to use? And think about the reusability concept. And then once you have everything, you can start building. I use Lucid Chart. This diagram that I created is I've used Whimsical, whimsical.com. So you can use Whimsical as well or Lucid Chart. Both are the free. Now, this example, if I take, this is an example of I get a requirement to create a flow where a user may want to clone another user, but we want to allow them to change some of the fields so that, like for example, email address or username. So this is the process flow diagram. So I'm going to start with the screen flow because user may want to change something. So I cannot use record trigger flows. Now this is on add user. So first allow them to select option. Okay, do they want to clone public group or queues of existing member, permission set or permission set assignment, or there are anything else. So you can allow them these options. Okay, now what happens if they select one of these options? So I want to clone it and I want to assign it to the new user. All right, next. Do not create flow for everything. How many of you has created flows for every requirement and later you realize that maybe a formula failed or maybe a Salesforce report might be an optimal solution for it? Anyone? Just write in the chat. All right, so there are some possibilities that you may want to use out of the box feature first, not using Salesforce flows. And when I'm working with some of the end user as an admin, they have done this mistake because they don't know when to use Salesforce report or formula field. Like for example, if you want to bring some field from account to opportunity, this is not an example of using Salesforce report. But if you want to do the vice versa, when you want to account got closed and you want to take the recent close opportunities amount and put it on the account, you may want to use Salesforce flows or automation tools. But again, if you want to bring some value from parent to child object, no, Salesforce formula is the right option. So likewise, there are such scenarios when you can use a Salesforce report or any other out-of-the-box feature to handle better rather than just going through the Salesforce flows, because flow is flexible and you can easily write the code. And there are some things that better handle through the Apex trigger. You can use the Apex trigger. Do not use Salesforce flow. Like for an example, I can recently face. So I created a platform event and middleware tools publishing a platform event and we subscribe it through the flows. And later we realized that the middleware layer can we publish a duplicate message in the single transaction. So in such cases, Salesforce flow cannot handle it because anytime you receive two messages in the single transaction, Salesforce will start two threading, two flow interviews. Whereas Apex trigger has only one thread, which help you to write the deduplicate logic. So the goal here is, if anything possible with the out-of-the-box feature, do not use Salesforce flows or any automation tool. If something can better handle through the Apex trigger, like I give an example, use Apex trigger, not using Salesforce flows. Now, third is build in Sandbox, not in the production. So how many of you ever done this mistake and modify or update a Salesforce flow in the production as Salesforce does not impose any restriction like Apex? Anyone? Just write in the comment. Never. Okay, good. Always Sandbox. Okay, good. 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 Okay. So everyone is using Sandbox, but I have done this mistakes in the past. I was working with the users, and there are some critical times I directly did in the mistakes. Go and update automation in the flow. So don't do that. Don't do that. And I also learned it because what happened is I created a flows. It triggered an email, and I was thinking it is very simple and directly update in the productions, and it. What happened is after a few minutes, a financial advisor called me and say, "Hey, my customer is getting an email like welcome email, but we onboarded that customer 5 years ago. Why they are receiving this email?" And suddenly I realized, okay, this happened because of one of my automations. Okay, it happened. Everyone do the mistakes. I also do the mistakes. We are human. But again, the learning here is never do anything in the productions. It is best practice to do in the sandbox. Test it first. Test positive scenario as well as negative scenario. Does not always test the positive scenario and think like your flow is working or your automation is working. No, always test. That is the test methodology. So always try to test positive as well as negative test scenarios, either you're writing test classes or you are manually testing it, and make sure that it is working for both the scenarios. If it is not, then you have to fix it. Okay, someone is saying done in the past in the productions. Okay, someone is like me. Thank you, Anis. Okay, next. Now, you can create as many as flows you want on one object. There are certain limits. I think it's a 2000 or something number of flows you can create entire org. But again, there is no limitation on how many record trigger flows. When it's come to the record trigger flows, you can create. Salesforce does not impose any limitations on it. So now when it's come to the record trigger flows, I suggest to only create one flow per object per type. Like what does it mean? It means like if you're a developer, so you understand that in Apex Trigger, you can put all the trigger event like before insert, before update, after insert and all in the single Apex Trigger, and then you can have handler and you can call it. But unlike Apex Trigger, Salesforce Flow does not support all handler in the single flows. So what I propose here is use one flow per object per type. Means use one before record trigger flows for handling before update, before insert, one for after insert and after update, and one for delete. So you can handle before delete scenarios. Do not try to create more than three one of these types in any given object, and you can use then subflow to handle it. I will show you how I manage in my current project, but do not try to create more than this flows in any given object unless you hit some limitations and you have to create. And when you get a new requirement, try to identify if you can use existing flows. If you use subflows, then it is very easier for you to go and update existing subflows, and that's all. You don't have to go and modify, create a brand new flows. It is very easy. And using this mechanism will help you to less likely hit the SQL limit, DML50 limit, and other limits as well. And this will force you to use subflows as well, because you can use subflow in the before trigger flows and after handler after flows as well. So you can use same subflows and call it from the both the places. All right. Now, when it's come to manage one record trigger flow per object per types, there are some concept that or tricks I suggest everyone should use. Do not write entry conditions here. When you write the entry conditions here, again, no one is going to stop you to do that. But if you write here, this flow is only limited to for one requirement, and next time when you have another requirement, you're going to write again a new line, and that's all. But that's not readable. I don't suggest to do all this. Don't write any logic here, and then you can go and add a decision element, and then use the decision element to write any conditions, and you have the branching, which is better for the readability, and you can easily able to manage one record trigger flow per object per type. Anyone has any questions? Okay, next. When it's come to using one record trigger flow per object, there are some best practices that I suggested. So when I have one record trigger flow, now how do I handle whether it is a record created or updated? So now what I suggest here is use a formula. Formula is very, very powerful. If you use formula wisely, you can able to handle a bigger flow and you can reduce it to like 10 or 20 elements. Last year, I had an experience last year, I think. I helped one community member to reduce their 140 elements from less than 20 element in the flows by using somewhere in the formula. We have used lots of formulas and we can able to reduce to 140 to 20 element, less than 20 element. So now what here you can do is you can create a formula, call it is new, and then we can have a decision element, and then we can check whether it is a new record or it is old record, and then you have their own path, and then you can use subflow, which is an auto launch flows, or you can use Apex code here if needed, and then you can call it from there. There are different formulas like is clone, then what else is new. Then if you can use all the formula that most of the formula that you use in the normal Salesforce formula field, you can able to use like if, is null, is blank, and all. Now here you can see another example. So you can see screenshot number 1. So I have one record trigger flow with one decision element with their 3 different paths. And what these 3 paths does is basically identify whether it is lost one and details and update their own fields. Now, do we really need this? Maybe yes, maybe no, depends. But again, in my case, no, I don't need these 3. What I can do better is I can create a single assignment element. And in the assignment element, you can see I have formulas here, and then formula I can check if is speak well stage name equals to close one, then use current date, otherwise use close date. And you can go nested if else statement here, and you can able to write any logic. And at the end, what you are ending with is you are ending with one record trigger flow with only one. This is the before save flow, so don't why there is no update statement. So this is before, and you are ending with just one assignment element which updates the opportunity, rather than having one decision element with 4 assignment element. So you can apply this logic and able to minimize number of elements that you can use in your flows. Now, build reusable flows. So reusable flows are things that maybe you can, the piece of work that can be reused in multiple places. The one example that you can see in my screen is create task. So create task is very common things. When opportunities close one, you want to create a task. When you onboard a new customer, you want to create a new task for some onboarding process. You want to take the document and you want to do something. Or if an order get processed, you want to create a task. Or if you lost a customer, you want to create a task. And then task creation has their own post-processing logic. Like, for example, task get created, send emails, do this, do that, notify local office and someone else. So you don't want to do these things again and again for each and every flows, which is not ideal, because you have, if there are any modification, you have to go to modify each and every flow. So what we can do is you can create a subflow, which is nothing but an auto launch flow. You can see in the highlight section, and you can write all your logic. Now, when it's come to calling this flow, you can go to the after save flows, and then or before delete flows or any other flows. Not the before save flows, because before save does not support subflows. Now you can call the subflows, and what you can do is, this is my variable var task in the subflows, and I'm passing the variables. You can pass as many as variables to your subflow if the subflows has such variables, and that's all. Then nothing else is required. And anytime you have to modify any logic, you can directly go to the subflows and modify the logic in subflow, rather than modifying same logic in 50, writing the same logic in 50 different flows and modifying logic in each and every flows. So subflow, basically what it consists input element, input variables, you can pass it from the main flows. And subflow is nothing but a sequence of actions, flow logic, and other flow logic. You can have another subflow in the subflows and to handle the business logic. And as I said that earlier, subflow is nothing but an auto launch flows. So how many of you have ever used subflow or using subflow right now? Just add in the comment. Yes, Daniel is saying subflow is used in a screen flow, correct. But if you have a screen flow, you cannot use that screen flow as a subflow in a record trigger flow. But yes, you can use subflow in the screen flow. Okay, so lots of people saying they haven't used subflows. Okay, so try to use subflow when you. This is very good examples when you started migrating from your process builder to workflow tool to Salesforce flows. So what I suggest is have a process flow diagram. Create a process flow diagram first because it will help you to understand what logic you are going to write. Second, it will help you to minimize some of the deduplicate logic because what happens is when most of the workflow rules are created by business users in many org, and they just created because they don't have any understanding. They created earlier and maybe later no one visited it, so it is still active but not needed. Now, third, when you create process flow diagram, then it will help you to understand whether it requires some piece of reusable code. Yes, you can able to write the subflows and then you can call the subflows. This skill and this tips is very, very helpful when it's come to migrating the process builder and workflow rule to subflows. So how many of you has migrated process builder and workflow rule to subflow in the past? Anyone? Just write in the comment. Oh, good. All right, so two people are saying yes, they have migrated in the process builder and workflow rule to subflows. You can always use my debug logs to debugging. That's the best way to debug. Not yet. Okay. Waiting for SF migration tool. Okay. Anis is saying waiting for SF migration tool. Okay. You can also start migrating by yourself. It is not that difficult. Start with analyzing each and every workflow rule and process builder, create a process flow diagram, validate it with the business users or stakeholders, because some of the logic, I just said that earlier, it's written by lots of business users, at least my experience, and such logics may not require right now. So you can able to clean up some automations, and then you can think about whether it is the logic is maybe required to require some reusable concepts, so you can use subflows and you can able to design one record trigger flow per object per type. All right, so let's move next forward. All right, so Salesforce Flow is very, very good, but Salesforce Flow has own limitations because Flow cannot solve each and every problem. So like for example, if you have a code object and you're using Salesforce code, out-of-the-box code, so now what is, when code gets created, you may want to, or code get accepted or code status is changed, you may want to automatically generate a code PDF. Right now, it's a manual by buttons. So a sales rep and advisor has to go and click on the button. And many times they forget it because they have lots of other things to do. So you may want to automate some process, such process. Now, what happens is you cannot directly auto-generate code PDF using Salesforce Flow because Salesforce Flow does not have any tools or any access for that. So where you require an Apex class to do that. So you in the Apex class, you can call Salesforce code template and you can able to generate a code PDF. Second, you may want to pass a list of account ID or list of opportunities ID and say, okay, can I get the list of code for it? Or can I, if I pass account ID in the get element, can I get all the list of opportunities for it? No, you cannot. Because get record element only accept a single ID, not a list of IDs. So in such scenarios, you have to require writing an Apex trigger. When it's come to the, so not Apex trigger, sorry, Apex class. When it's come to the screen flow, you may want to display a record in a table and allow you to user to select a couple of record. That is an example of data table. So you can use a data table. If you go to unofficial sf.com, you can find someone created data table. You can use it. And there are another use case as well. So Salesforce Flow does not have everything. Salesforce is trying to add as many as feature, but there are some limitations. And when limitations comes in, do not try to write Apex trigger. You can plug and play Apex code and you can able to get more out of Salesforce flows. So you can use, if you look at an example in the left or right hand side of my screen, I use at the rate of invocable method, which is an annotation. If you want to use a Salesforce Apex class in the Salesforce flows, and you can pass only one at the rate invocable method annotation you can use per Apex class, and it support input and output parameters. Make sure that it is a bulk save. When you are copying or getting some Apex class or code from the GitHub, make sure that you validate with your developers or architect in your company and make sure that it follows the Salesforce best practices, standard, and your company naming convention, and then you can feel free to use it. Next, do not hard code IDs. So how many of you have done this mistake in the past, hard coding IDs in Process Builder or Salesforce Flows or Apex Trigger? Just write your thought in the comment or your experience. Okay, I did. Puneet saying, okay, I also did. So I'm also with you. Daniel, okay. Yes, Ankit is saying, Ankit, good. I did. Okay. So most of like me, we have done same mistake. Okay, that's fine. As I said that earlier, we are human, so learning from mistakes. Okay, so this is one of the common mistakes everyone does, and I have done as well, like yours. So there are such situations, for example, why we need to hard code the ID. So like if you see an example here, I have an approval process, and I want for a certain scenario, I want to send it for a different approver, and those approval may change at any point of given time. User joined a company, left the company, we want to send the approval request to someone else. So things change in the time. So now how we handle such things? We have to hard code the ID. Now, okay, so business said that, okay, for right now, for 2 weeks until we come back, if lead source is web and type is existing customer replacement, then send opportunity approval to Andy Smith. Now, right now we are sending Andy Smith, but it can change at any point of time. So this is hard code, but we don't want to hard code such things in Salesforce Flow, because anytime it changes, you have to go to the Salesforce Flows and change it. So now what you can do is you can go create a custom metadata types, and you can save the name, ID, email address, whatever you want, and then you can query. So it will help you in the future. So if business comes to you and say, okay, I want to change this user to maybe James Anderson, okay, go ahead and update the user ID or email address or whatever field you are using. So you don't have to go and update or modify your Salesforce flow. Rather than you can just go to the custom metadata types and update it, which is very, very helpful. You can also use custom settings or custom labels, but I don't suggest. I strongly recommend to use custom metadata types. And then you can use get element in the Salesforce flow. You go to the get element, you can query, store the what you want, and then report back into the Salesforce flows. Now, handle error path with the fault path. So now what happens is in Salesforce, again, no one can guarantee that their code won't fail. So it code and Salesforce Flow both are the same thing. It may fail at the runtime, but again, we don't want to display such weird messages to user. We want to display some meaningful message to users so that they know what to do. Because as a developer and architect, I understand what happened when flow fails, how to fix it, but the user does not know. Many of the users had very hard time to use computer. So we may want to display a meaningful message so that what happens is if a flow fails or code fails, they know that whom to reach out. So this is a strongly recommend when you create a screen flow, use a fault element. So what happens is when you add the fault element, you can use flow.fault messages, and you can able to write meaningful message. Like for example, there is some error occurred. You may want to reach company administrator at this email or this phone number, so they can directly ring or call. Or you can also put your Jira ticket Jira number or Jira request URLs or somewhere ServiceNow or any other tools URL, Salesforce support URL if you are managing your cases in Salesforce. So, and they can directly open a case, which will very, very helpful. And you can also capture this logs in Salesforce and then review later. When you use fault element, there are few possibilities. You may want to send a customized error email for yourself as well, or few people as well, so they can go and read it. Again, Salesforce is sending as well, but those emails messages only persist for 72 hours or 42 hours. I don't remember the exact number of hours, but after that, Salesforce will delete it. So you may want to have your own logging capabilities or mechanism. Next. Now, when the flow fails or code fails, so do not worry, because this happened with each and every on this call, I feel. So if you're a developer, admin, this happen all the time. So if flow fails, don't worry, you are not the first one and you are not going to be the last one who has this problem. So great powers come with great responsibilities. So if you are a developer, administrator, okay, you have the power. So again, it fails, that's fine. So now how to debug it? There are lots of ways to debug it. First, Salesforce send an email. You can also use the fault element and receive an email. So now if you go through that email, 50% times you can able to resolve it by just going through that email. Now, if you're not able to resolve it, there's a link on that email. If you go to the link and open it, Salesforce will open a fault UI on the Salesforce. And then it will show you which path Salesforce Flow has taken and what was the value at that point of time. So which is a nice way to debug it. And at the end, if nothing works, and if you have very complicated automations in your org, then use the debug log. I often use debug log to identify and understand which flow fires first, which flow fired later, and what was the sequence. So this is the debug log. On-screen debugging and Salesforce email are the best way you can able to identify why flow failed at runtime. Now, bonus tips. So one of the things that we do while uploading the data, so if you upload the data via import wizard, so Salesforce has a feature called as do not trigger workflow rule and process builder. But what about the data loader? So if you're uploading the data to the data loader and you may want to do not trigger some of the email that you don't want to fire some of the Salesforce flows, otherwise it will trigger some email to the customers. So you can skip such things. You don't have to deactivate it. You can use custom permission to bypass flows at any given point. So create a custom permissions, and then you can check the custom permission using dollar permissions and use the permission custom permission name, and you can use whether it is assigned or not assigned. You can assign a custom permission to any user. The best way is use permission set and assign that permission set to any user. So if you do this check at the starting of the flow, and if you want to deactivate flow at any given one point of time, what you can do, you can assign that permission set to yourself, that's all, and then flow will not fire for you. So this is very, very helpful when it's come to the designing flows. This is one example. There are lots of examples where custom permission might be very, very helpful. So have you ever used custom permissions with the flows? If yes, type your comment in the chat. I just want to see how many of you have used custom permission. Okay, so Amit Chaudhary, okay, no, most of the people say no. Okay, Ankit says yes, okay. All right, so trying to use custom permission is very, very helpful when you want to write flows which only fire for one business unit, not fire for other business units. You can also use the custom permissions. And the last but the not least, do not write a DML statement inside the loop. So this is one of the biggest mistakes lots of people do, and I have seen many times in the community. So do not, like if you see the screenshot one, what I have done here is I have a list of opportunities which I look through, and then I'm creating a line item inside a loop. So this may be good for if you have to record, but that is not advisable. Do not do that. Some people can argue, okay, what happened if I have 5 records? That is fine, but you cannot guarantee that it always have only 5 records. So do not do all these mistakes. That is not good. This will easily hit the DML exception limit, which is DML 150. Or if you have a get element here, then you can hit SQL 101. So what is the best way to do this? The best way is create a first S object, which is the record variables of type here, opportunity line items, add all the data into that S object variable or record variables, and then create a new record collections variable, which is a list equivalent to an Apex. And then you can add all your record variable into the record collections variable and hold everything in the record collections variable. And at the end of the loop, you can use one DML statement to create the opportunity line item. So here, if you have 5 records, so here we are using 5 DML statements, where here we are only using one DML statement to create all opportunity line items. This approach will help you to avoid some of the common governor limits that I mentioned earlier, DML statement 150 or SQL 101. Now, let's put everything together and how the frameworks will work, what I'm going to propose. So my framework is very, very simple. So again, this is just right, but I have some screenshot as well. So first, create a record trigger flows before save, after save and before delete. And then we are going to call handler, which is nothing but my subflow account handler. Okay. And then you can have as many as subflows and you can call in that handler. So first, this is handler, account handler, and which is an auto launch flow. Now, if you look at this handler very carefully, you may notice that there are three paths here: after insert, after update, and before delete. But how the heck I am able to identify whether it is after insert, after update, or before delete? So if you look at here carefully, I have three variables, which is say after insert, after update, and after before delete, which is I am checking here in the decision element. If after insert is true, means it has to go to this path. If after update is true, then go this path, and before delete is true, go this path. And then I have two more variables, which is new account details and all account details, which I am going to pass it from when I call the subflow from a main flows. And then you can see here I have a subflow which create a task, and then I have a send email alert, which is sending an email when account is out of business. Now, this is an account after save flows. Now, this is a flow without having any conditions here. You can see there are no conditions here, entry criteria, basically. Now, when it's insert, I use the formula is new and check whether it is insert or update. If it is insert, then on the after insert variables, which is this, I'm passing it true, then rest of all is false. They're all false. And then on the insert, you will only get the new record. So I'm just passing the new record. Whereas when it is update, you can see here only after update is true. This is true, false. And at the update, you will get also new record as well as old record both. So pass it here. That's all. So now it is very simple. You don't have to modify this flow at any given point of time once you create it. So once it is insert, it will pass all these variables here, and this it will go back. It will call this node. It is update. As here you can see, update is true here, which will take this route, and this will go here, and then you can write all your logic here. So in going forward, if you have any requirement, you don't have to touch this one because this is going to be constant. What you have to do is you have to go and modify this flow in the going forward, and you can create subflows, paths, and all here. Same as before delete. When it is the delete, only delete is true, rest of all is false, and on the delete you have only the new. That's all. Now, before save flow, Salesforce does not support subflow in the before save flow as of now. So feel free to write the logic here, but make sure that you are only not writing anything inside the loop, or you're following the best practices here, and use before save only when you want to update same record, not any related record. So for example, if account get closed, it's the closed one, you want to update opportunity close date equals to today. So that is the example of before save flow, not an after save flow. So such logic you can handle in the before save flows. What next? There are some resources that you can go and learn. Salesforce Apex Basic for Admin in the Trailhead, Flow Basics, Flow Builder, and Process Design Without Limits. So these are some of the Trailhead modules. I strongly recommend go and check them out. Last but not least, here you can find some of the blogs. Jennifer Lee blog, Automation Hours, Force Panda by Narendra Lee, Pijardcast, Automation Champion, and obviously Apex Hour now have a long list of Salesforce Flow sessions, so you may want to go and watch and learn. But last, not least, practice. Watching will not make you expert, only practice will help you. With that said, thank you so much, Amit, for the opportunity. And open for any questions.
Thank you, Rakesh sir, for such a great session. And regarding that PPT, yes, we will provide the PPT and recording very soon. So Rakesh sir, would you like to read the question from the chat window, or you want me to read and answer?
Okay, let me read. It's a long chat, so let me start from beginning. Give me just 1 second, 1 minute. All right. So what is a great place for a beginner admin to start with Salesforce flows? So I think Amit already shared the link of Apex Hour YouTube channel. You may want to go and watch the videos. And then if you have time, you can also check my website. And there are lots of other websites as well. Like Jennifer is very good. She has very detailed out Salesforce flow. So you may want to check that out. Anything else, Amit, you want to include? You may want to add your YouTube link playlist as Amit at the end so people can get copy.
I already shared that in the chat window.
All right. I'm still reading and not see. Okay, there's no questions. Okay, so some people say they are using mind mapping, POC, and prototyping flow chart, which is good. Can we use this way that I populate an unencrypted field corresponding to the encrypted field, then use that encrypted field to flows? You can do that. Again, that's not a problem, but again, you are deduplicating the data and you have one more field to manage. So it's better to use Apex instead of, and if you have only one field, then I can think, okay, that's good. But if you have more encrypted fields, so you don't want to creating a duplicate field for each of them, it's better to write in simple Apex class, which can take a query parameters and return list or records. Do not try to create more fields just to handle one scenario. That is not the best approach, at least. Is it advisable to go for Apex Core or use Flow for custom solutions? You can use, I'm using Salesforce Flows for my current project, which is mission critical, and I only use Apex Trigger for subscribing a platform event or content document object, which is not supported by Salesforce Flow. So I can say that you can go with the Salesforce Flow, but again, you have to plug and play Apex code wherever needed, because Salesforce Flow does not have flexibility when it's come to passing a list of IDs and get the record. But again, if you create a small utility class once, that's all. You can call it from multiple places.
So when you're writing the flow and trigger, make it balanced properly. Working with mixing Apex Flow, Process Builder, and workflow together is a big crime. And you will never ever able to control that order of execution. So when you're doing it, you should have strategy when we'll go with the flow, when you'll go with the trigger.
Correct, exactly. All right, what next? Yes, Ron, you are correct. Asynchronous process require entry criteria, which breaks this module. That is true, which is very, very true. And that's what I was discussing last week with one of the architects. So you can create a subflow. You can use another flow just for async right now, but I feel like Salesforce may going to introduce some of the way, some way to use without using entry criteria and then use the decision element for async way. So let's see what coming in the next release. Is subflow concept similar to nested class in Apex? You can say yes, more or less. So it is basically handler, which or utility class that we use, and you can call it from anywhere else. I need a screen flow once the having fields editable when creating new record, but once the record created, show the same screen layout having same field, but in non-editable field. So right now, Salesforce Flow does not have a non-editable. You can use the, which field? There is a read-only fields. I don't remember the name, but you can use it. But I heard that in the next release or next to next release, Salesforce is introducing a new features where you can make field read only on the UI. But again, safe harbor. I have heard this in some webinar with Salesforce Product Manager. Yes, it is always a best practice to minimize the flow element as much as you can. If somewhere you have to use Apex is better solution, use it. Do not just unnecessarily try to write a flow for everything, which can get complicated. So that is not advisable.
So
Yes. So go
my
ahead, Amit.
suggestion, when you think you need to do the heavy performance stuff, logically go with a trigger. And when you do the automation, like sending email, sending notification, all this kind of thing, go with flow. Don't do too much DML inside the flow. That is the key rule. And anyhow, that's my personal recommendation.
Yes, and sometime I have seen people in the somewhere like they're looping through and they're because Salesforce has 2,000 element limit in the transaction, so they write some variables and then publish something else in there. So it is best way that you can write a simple Apex which can handle. Do not try to write unnecessary logic.
And I'm heavily waiting when before subflow will be allowed in before save. So that will be a big change, because right now it is only available into after. So I hope that will be resolved lots of issues in the flow in existing one, whatever we have.
Correct. Now, someone is asking, is knowing process builder a required prerequisite to knowing flow? No, there is no prerequisite to know flows. But again, first, before building, first try to make a process flow diagram and have your ingredient ready. Like when we cook, we do not directly go and cook it. We first plan it. We bring all the ingredients. Then we started preparing. So same applicable here. So do not try to just build the flows. Have a process flow diagram, have your ingredients ready, then build it. All right. Ankit is saying he's great fan of your Apex Hour. Good. Good job, Amit. All right. So we have Paul here as well. Hey, Paul. Thank you. And you may want to watch Paul's sessions he did for Apex Automation Hour on the how you can use platform event to handle large data volume. Can I open a flow screen by clicking any link put in the guidelines section under the path element? I have never tried, but you can do that because for flows, you will get a URL and then you can put the right, go to the flows and then flows, you will get the URL in the description sections when you open the flow detail element. And you can do that for, I'm not 100% sure, but it is possible somewhere. All right. Does it even make sense to put DML statement inside and loop? No, at least for not me. No, never, ever. That is the very basic things. Do not ever put a DML statement inside a loop, even though you know that it's only one record or two record. No, always try to write the best way when it's come to the flows. So don't never ever write. Can we use schedule flow as replacement for schedule Apex or batch Apex? So for me, no, because again, as I said that Salesforce Flow is good, but there are limitations. So you can say you cannot totally replace it because you may need Apex code. Depends on what is the business logic is. If your business logic is write a job which run every night and automatically generate a PDF and send to the customer. So PDF generation is not a capability of Salesforce Flow. It's Salesforce Apex and something else can do that. So not 100%. Anything you want to add, Amit?
You pretty much cover everything.
Almost.
And with the sake of time, and thank you everyone like posting the question over here. And we will share the recording very soon on our Apex Hour Apex Hour YouTube channel, and the PPT also will share on our Apex Hour website, so you can follow it and rewatch. And if you have any question, don't forget to reach out to me or Rakesh. And I already share Automation Champion link. If you want to learn more about the flow, just go and learn from the champion.
Thank you, Amit, for your kind word. And thank you, everyone.